If I'm asked what's my favorite season of the year, I will answer winter. Autumn a close second, then spring, and lastly summer. However, I have somewhat of an autumn curse, if you can call it that. Every year I lay plans and then something comes up, usually a tour with the band, and I miss the window. I missed a few weeks of exploding colors up in the mountains. And in 4 years I can only think of one photograph I've taken, which has autumn colors in it. There are probably more, but none that comes to mind, and that usually means they're probably not my best work. This year I aim to remedy that. I'm gonna build up my portfolio, and next year when I make my photo calendar and October comes up, I will know what photograph to use. I will not use a photograph from late August and pretend it's from October. Never again. So back in August, Kjersti's side of the family grew by 1. And in late September, we decided that it was high time that we paid a visit to little Henry. And so we did. But in a totally unrelated matter, a complete coincidence if you will, the colors in the mountains were exploding. And I had 4 days up here. 4 days to break my curse. Previously, I had only visited Vingelen during summer and winter. And since it wasn't long ago since I last visited this place, I was really looking forward to see just how much the landscape changed during autumn. After a good night's sleep, I called up my good friend Hans and asked if I could join him while he worked. One of his duties as a park ranger is to check for hunting licenses. And since the annual grouse hunting just had started, we went out in the field to hunt for some hunters. Myself, I would hunt with my camera. The colors up here were great. And we had some really atmospheric conditions, like low cloud coverage and some drizzle. The wet ground helped make the colors pop more, but the fog almost worked more against me than for me, at least regarding the color. Even so, the photographs I took through the fog, now that I look back at things, speaks to me most. Overall, a really good start and a really good day, and I was already looking forward to the next hike. Although I was really happy with the photographs I got the day before, I still was not 100% convinced I had a portfolio image among them yet. But the good thing was that I knew I was getting closer. I knew that if I was at the same locations with ideal conditions, those photographs of the red hills would work really well. I just had to keep at it and it would eventually happen. My spirit as I went out the next day was therefore really high. The conditions, however, remained the same, so that's why I decided to drive around on the mountain roads looking for compositions that would work when the ideal conditions eventually came. I'm actually starting to know these mountain roads pretty well now, so in many ways it felt like coming home, seeing old friends in new clothes. My mind was spinning at the beginning, so I decided to spend the first 2 hours photographing almost everything I saw, just to get the autumn colors out of my system, so to speak. I figured it would get easier to spot the good compositions when I was not seeing every tree and every color at once, if that makes sense. It's a little trick I learned long ago. When I'm at a great location or I see conditions I have not dealt with before, I take in too much at once and I miss the little things. That's why I find it so useful to photograph a lot in the beginning. And when the mind eventually quiets down, zoom in and narrow your search. At least that works for me. I still don't think I got a portfolio image this day either, but I was getting closer and closer, and I had 2 days left. The next day I was invited by my father-in-law Mons to join him on a hike to the mountain 𝐔𝐿𝐾𝐑 and see the view over the valley 𝐔𝐚𝐬𝐿. It was not very hard to say yes, especially seeing that it was not raining this day. Besides, the hike would take us past those red hills, this time with no fog and hopefully in sunny weather. The rain clouds had blown away by a passing gale, and we knew that it would get windier and windier as we climbed the hills towards 𝐔𝐿𝐾𝐑. And sure enough, we noticed the wind just a bit. The hike first took us past lush, colorful birch trees, before we eventually got to a vantage point overlooking some red hills, one of the subjects I wanted to photograph. I was overjoyed to see the hills in sunlight, but it felt like the colors were more vibrant when they were in the shade, so I tried focusing on taking photographs when parts of the composition were covered with shadows from the clouds. When we eventually got to the peak, the wind was so strong that it was actually hard to stay up on my feet, and for the first time I was actually worried that my glasses would blow off my face and disappear into the valley below. It was in this wind that I first felt I got my first portfolio image. It was a photograph of the mountain 𝐔𝐒𝐿𝐾𝐑, viewed from the neighboring mountain 𝐵𝐵𝐿𝐾𝐑. I could hardly stand on my feet, so I was hunched over a rock, one hand on my glasses and the other hand on the S1. I pressed the shutter. Click. It was first when I got back home and started editing on the Red Hills photographs I realized that I had already gotten another portfolio image that day. Now I had 2, and still 1 day to go. I took many more photographs that day, and here are some honorable mentions from the same day. In the next episode, I will spend a day in Forollhogna National Park, photographing the peak of autumn in the best conditions I had on this photography trip. I will start the hike in autumn and I will end the hike in winter as I climb higher and higher. I hope you will continue watching this series when it airs, so maybe consider subscribing to get notified when I upload part 2. In the meantime, take care, stay safe, and thanks for watching.